A lot of people say Legacies makes no sense, but in truth, I loved it. In truth, I feel like it's the basis, right? Well, whatever you're about to say now doesn't mean anything because you're biased towards liking Legacies. You know what I mean? So it doesn't mean anything, you know? But I'm about to show you something really quickly. In the Vampire Diaries, I'm about to put my headphones really quickly. I feel like I talk better when they're on. There we go. In the Vampire Diaries, we're in 2009, baby, to like 2000 and I don't know what was it, 2009 to like maybe 2029 or something like that, because they did like a 7-year time jump. But anyways, we're in 2009. A lot of things has already happened, right? We have the other side set up. We have hell. We have, of course, we've always had limbo. You know what I mean? We have peace. We have this and that. We didn't lose peace or limbo, but we have those. You know what I mean? We have so many things set in place, so many barriers on the other side set in place, well, in the afterlife, so many dimensions and other stuff like that. Even 1903, you feel me? 94, we have the 1994 prison world, we have the 1903 prison world, we have so many prison worlds, so many dimensions, so many afterlives, you know. And everything is like we're living in a modern universe without even realizing it. In 2009, everything's perfect, pretty much, literally, because everything's set up. Everything, there's a barrier to everything. But when we're talking about, when we get to Legacies, right, and we realize, well, we're in 2009, right, and we're talking about dragons and myth and mythos and lore and folklore, right? When we're introduced to werewolves, we're like, what the heck? To us right now in 2000, well, when we're introduced to freaking werewolves, right? I think it's like in season 2. When we're introducing werewolves in season 2, there's this thing to where we think it's just a regular storyline being built up, right? That's all it is. A regular storyline. Wait for a second. A regular storyline being built up. Doesn't matter. We're fine. We'll just, okay, cool. We talked about vampires. You feel me? We got introduced to vampires, and now we're getting introduced to werewolves. Whoa, what do you mean, right? And it seems natural, and it seems beautiful, and it seems perfect, and it seems just like another storyline being built up, right? But if you look really closely at how they unleashed the werewolves, right, not just the shape, the shape of them, right, the cosmetic nature of them, but I'm talking about how we were introduced to them. Right? Where do we look first? Now, mind you, if you don't like Legacies, after this discussion, you won't still like Legacies. You feel me? If you won't like Legacies, if you don't think it makes sense after this, you probably won't still think it makes sense. But I'm just going to explain why it does make sense. You dig me? When we tried to find out werewolves, like the history on werewolves, stuff like that, where do we search for? We searched in the mythos and the myths and the legends, right? When we're talking about, we went to Duke University, gang. Do you dig me? We went to Duke University. Well, actually, even prior to that, Alaric literally looked up and was like, werewolves this and werewolves that and Aztec this and da 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 da, right? The shamans and the this and that, whatever the heck, right? But when we're talking about really diving deep into it and like we have a whole episode, we actually went to Duke University to look up werewolf lore, right? And of course we have Katharina, we found some Katharina stuff out as well, Katharina Petrova stuff. But truly, a lot of the stuff, all I'm saying is that we actually went and we looked up, we went to the myth and the legends of it all, right? The folklore, we went to folklore and myth. We went to that section, right? The occult studies, right? Isabel literally loved vampires, right? And she literally made a career, gang, out of being one of those people who was like occult studies people, right? Eventually, Alaric even got into it when it comes to I think it's called the Foundry, or I think it's called the Foundry. The infirmary. I'd say infirmary is crazy. I think it's called the Foundry, or the Armory, or the something like that. It was something like that. I think Foundry, Armory, maybe the Armory. No, maybe I don't know. Armory. I don't know. Whatever. But yeah, occult studies, right? Occult studies. If you don't know the definition, probably it's like the study of like the mystique. The mystique is crazy. The study of the mysterious. You know what I mean? And just like the supernatural stuff in the world, right? That's how we got like a Shane, or we got a Grams, right, who study at Whitmore College, going crazy with her occult study situation, right? She's a professor. She was going crazy with it. Same with Shane, you feel me? After, you dig me, she passed or whatever. When we're talking about truly, and so when we looked up the werewolves, we got to that point of like, we had to search in the myth and folklore situation. But let's go to dragons, right? Who else is in the folklore and myths? Dragons, leprechauns, Krampus, fairies, Sphinx, you know what I mean? Oracles, you know what I mean? You dig me? Like, it really get like that. So we're talking about all these things, well, phoenixes, you know what I mean? We're talking about all these creatures, right? We've heard these names before as children, you know? And even just like directly coming from the source of folklore and myth, you know? It all makes sense. It makes so much sense, in fact. You feel me? There's this moment in the TV show in like season 1 maybe, where Damon is talking to Caroline and he says, I live in the real world where the sun burns and stuff like that. Da, da, da. You feel me? When he's like reading Twilight or something in her bed. And it's like there's this whole thing of like, okay, we're real and everyone else is not. Ha 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 ha. You know what I mean? And the fandom looked at that scene and was like, yeah, that makes so much sense. And I just like, da 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 da. You feel me? Even when I was younger, I was like, that's cool. You know, they're making fun of Twilight. But my whole thing since I was 10 years old was I wanted to see the gods of this universe. You dig me? And in reality, you most likely can't get to the gods of this universe without exploring every single creature that, like, the gods is like the final boss. You feel me? So you have to get through all these other species. You feel me? To really get to the core origins of this universe, of this world. You know what I mean? And so always in the back of my mind when I'm 10 years old, genuinely, was if vampires exist, okay, cool. Werewolves exist, okay, cool. By they introduced werewolves, okay, cool. They're real, you know what I mean? Okay, cool. Witches exist, okay, cool. Clearly there's more species that exist. Hybrids, you guys love that. I don't want to curse, but you guys love that hybrid so much. Klaus Michelson. You guys love the tribrid so much. Hope Michelson. You don't think it's stupid. You think it's realistic. You think it's a possibility. You think it's just real. You know what I mean? As far as like in the TVD world, you think it's real. You think it's like, yeah, I accept that someone could be a vampire and a werewolf at the same time. And yeah, mind you guys glaze Klaus Michelson, right? Woohoo! Klaus Michelson, the strongest. Klaus Michelson, the most immortal. Klaus Michelson, da 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 da. He is awesome. He is aura in itself. You know what I mean? And this whole situation of glazing Klaus Michelson, a vampire werewolf hybrid, right? Okay, that's fine. You guys think that's realistic? Cool. When we're talking about Hope Michelson, right? Vampire, witch, werewolf. Oh my gosh, I love Hope Michelson. She's just so, oh my god, she's all three. Woohoo! The glaze never ceases, right? You guys think it's real. You guys think it's possible. You guys think it's realistic, right? For 3 species to be one person or whatever the heck. For 2 species to be in this one being, right? Fine, right? So this whole idea of like cross genes, right? Cross DNA is a possibility, is a thing. You feel me? So that in itself right there has to do with science, right? To be honest. And so, well, let's get to season 5. I'm about to bring you on the hypocrisy of, you feel me, the Vampire Diaries fandom here. And it's like this whole idea of hybrids existing and hope existing, right? All this cross DNA, right? That's going on, right? That's literal science. That's biological science taking place, right? But then you get to season 5 where they actually mix science, right, with this vampire stuff that's going on, right? Oh my god, people think that rippers are just naturally born, right? Okay, cool. Let's take a vampire and let's forcibly up his appetite. Let's forcibly up it to like insane heights. I am a scientist. I can do such. Once I mix what's it called, a vampire, and my medicine that I have here, and some test studies. Boom, right? And they do that, right? And it becomes this whole thing of like, oh my gosh, I just don't like what's it called? Which I don't like medicine and vampirism. I don't like this and that. Everything starts to get weird. Da, da, da. They was already like over here. They already showed you that there is some level of science behind species, but that's neither here nor there. We're not here for that. I'm just pointing out another point of hypocrisy for the fandom. When we're talking about a whole new species, actually, wait for a second. A whole new species was created. Hope Michelson, right? Vampire, witch, and werewolf. You guys believe that Hope Michelson was real, but that someone like, mind you, and a whole new species was created with freaking this guy right here, Klaus Michelson, right? You feel me? In this show, a whole new species was created. Vampire and werewolf, right? And you believed it was real. But when you get to like something like a dragon or a leprechaun or Krampus or a phoenix or a sphinx or an oracle or a this or that, somehow it becomes this is not realistic. This is child's play. This isn't TVD. This is da 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 da. This is ridiculousness. This can't happen. This is not correct, right? But the explanation for why it can happen was so real, was so authentic, it blended in with the lore so seamlessly, right? Of course, even, guess what, guys? Even Klaus Michelson and the rest of his family, of course, outside of Henrik. Now, Henrik was alive then, but then he died. But anyways, Malivore doesn't exist until Malivore is like maybe 800 years old. Klaus Michelson is 1,000. Malivore doesn't start consuming insane amount of beasts, right? Malivore doesn't consume the drag. Malivore isn't even created until like 200 years later. You do the math for me. You feel me? Malivore isn't created until like 200 years later. When Klaus Michelson and the rest of his family is 200-year-old vampires and da 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 da, right? That's when Malivore is created and starts consuming dragons and these people and those people and you feel me? Which means that those species were alive when Klaus Michelson was alive back in Klaus Michelson's day. You feel me? For 200 years straight. You feel me? And beyond, to be honest. But those species were living and thriving and this and that while Klaus Michelson, before even Klaus Michelson became a vampire, but then he does become a vampire, and 200 years into his vampirism, they're still around. Dragons were still roaming the earth when Klaus Michelson was a 200-year-old vampire. They didn't get mollywopped until 200 years after his vampirism. You dig me? Like, they was there at his 199th birthday, 198th birthday. They was there, like, they were around the world, you feel me, during that time. There's a moment in Legacies where they say that Klaus and the Necromancer was good friends, great friends. You feel me? And then one day, I think it was D-Day, right? I don't know the exact year that D-Day takes place, but that's unfortunate, to be honest. But I think it was like D-Day, right? And boom, you dig me? Like, boom, you feel me? That's when the Necromancer gets mollywopped. You don't think gets mollywopped. That's when the Necromancer gets consumed by Malivore and he's forgotten, right? I think D-Day takes place, what, 19, what is that? D-Day 1944. I was gonna say 1942 or 1945, but D-Day, right? So the Necromancer gets mollywopped in 1944, what's it called? 44, right? I think. I think it was D-Day. Yeah. But anyways, and then he gets consumed, and then Klaus forgets about him, right? The whole world who ever knew him forgets about him, forget about his existence, right? And that's just the way that it was, right? Because Malivore exists. Malivore, I'm about to tell you how it makes so much sense, because in order for Malivore to not be weak, right? We're talking about like a vampire, right? They have to feed on blood to sustain themselves as big and strong vampires and stuff of that nature. Malivore's life force, in a way, you feel me? Of course, he just becomes weaker, you feel me? But his life force, his vitality, so to speak, is is directly tied to his consumption of species. So when he's like, when Klaus Michelson is 200 years old, right, and Malivore is created, and he starts consuming dragons and these people and those species and these species, right? He literally is consuming species every single day. So the more, like, I mean, all the time. So every single day or all the time, you feel me? You forget like all these people, all these things like dragons and phoenixes and leprechauns and these people and those people and these people and these people and da da da. All these people are being forgotten. You know, all these people are, well, all these species, all these legendary species are being forgotten and turning into like mythos almost, right? We have dragon, what's it called? We have dragon scriptures, right? When people write stuff down and you can see, oh my gosh, that's a dragon. But this thing has wings, right? They can't say the name, whatever. But this thing has wings and this thing is da da da. Okay, maybe it's like a dragon, maybe like it's like you feel me? Like this huge bird with wings is flying over stuff, and we have like a picture of like a little description of it with a whoop. That's all they have. So it becomes this whole mythos and folklore thing. You know what I mean? That becomes this whole mythos and folklore thing. We're talking about vampires. Well, I'm not saying vampires. We're talking about this whole idea of, well, by the way, he doesn't get tired, right? When it comes to Malivore, from like, we have the 10th, I think Klaus was born in like the 10th century, maybe the 9th. I'll say the 10th. Or the 9th, late 9th century. I'll say 10th century, whatever the heck. 11th, 12th, maybe. Yeah, I'll say, okay, cool. I guess, right? I don't know. I would say, let me see. The 14th century. Malivore doesn't get tired, you feel me, of sourcing his own food until the 14th century. And then he gets Cleo. You dig me? Then he gets Cleo. 1464, I think he goes and get Cleo. From, what's it called? I think Nigeria. But yeah. So when we're talking about like from the maybe what 12, maybe like 11. Oh, let me see if it's like, let me see. I think they were born in the 10th century, maybe, right? 10th century. Let's say they born in the 10th century, right? Bam, 11, 12, right? We have 1200s right here. Okay, cool. So it'll be like the 11th century. I think Malivore is like born in like the 11th century. Well, actually, it was born in like 1080. Oh, I don't. So much. That's just so much. But yeah. There's this huge gap between like the 11th or 12th century. I believe like the 11th century, and all the way to the 14th century, right? You dig me? So he's like consuming people for consuming species that's getting turned into mythos and folklore for hundreds of years consistently. And he cannot touch vampires, werewolves, or witches. So he's never coming after a Klaus Michelson. He's never coming after a Michelson family. Otherwise, it would have been first on his list. You dig me? But Yeah, so like Klaus maybe never sees this guy. You know what I mean? Ever. When we're talking about that makes so much sense to me. I feel like there's this. I'm about to just like speak to you really quickly, human being to human being here, but I feel like there's this huge rise of anti-intellectualism in the world, right? It doesn't mean that you have to be the most intellectual person, right? I just mean that there's a huge lack of using your context clues in order to come up with sound conclusions and not emotion-based conclusions, right? And not just, okay, I like this character, and so this is what it is. You know what I mean? Well, like, I'm about to give you an example. If I'm the biggest Silas fan, I am the biggest Silas fan, right? So you're going to be like there's biases there, right? There's biases there, right? Okay, cool. But I'm still going to acknowledge the fact that Silas said, I made the immortality spell. Okay, cool. Ketsia said, I made the immortality spell. He lied. Give me flashbacks. You know what I mean? She gives flashbacks. She's telling her story. And yet, in TVD, we never see them both in the lab creating the immortality spell. You dig me? She reverse engineers it, apparently, right? Create the cure for the immortality spell, right? Boom, the cure. Wham. And he has incredible feats, right? He gets rid of the hunter's curse, and he reverse engineers the anchor, right? And so there's this thing of like, mind you, he has big feats, right? But they're like going undercover, right? He has big feats that's going on, and she has done big feats, right? She created the cure, right? Apparently, she purportedly or whatever, literally reverse engineered the immortality spell. He says that's not possible. What? She says, I promise you, it works. You know what I mean? So she has these feats over here. He has these feats over there. He says, I created the immortality spell. She says she created it. They never have a discussion about who created the immortality spell. They never have a discussion about the immortality spell. And I mean, they never have a direct discussion. It's never become a concluded thing. Mind you, let's take a zoom out, right? There's Amara, there's Silas, and there's Ketsia. The only three people right now in that season that was there back then in the day. Back in the day, those were the only three people that are now here in the present, right? So if you guys are not going to say who created it, right? Silas is claiming ownership. Kessie is creating ownership. Okay, soul ownership, by the way. Soul. It's a soul ownership, by the way. That's hilarious. That's absolutely hilarious. In the flashback, right? Let's go to the flashback really quickly. In the flashback, Silas says, I never want us to part. You know what I mean? I want to find a way for us to be together. You know what I mean? To me, that implies that they both worked on this immortality spell. But they're like exes. So none of them ever is going to ever, period, point blank, give credit to the other. Period. You dig me? When we're talking about lying, right? Bonnie says, okay, cool. Silas says, okay, cool, Bonnie can use my death to come back. But then Silas says, never mind. I want Delana to be destroyed. I don't know. It's not happening. When Kessia goes over here, right? She lies to Stefan, right? And then she like gets Elena to go inside the house, right? To be used as a bargaining chip so Damon can kill Silas, right? There's another moment, of course, she lies to Catherine, right? I'm not helping you, da da da. You feel me? These people, right? You feel me? Silas, like this whole point in like Kessia doing the anchor spell, knowing that Bonnie would never be a sustainable anchor for the other side. Bonnie's not 2,000 years old nor immortal. You feel me? She's for all intended purpose, like 19 or 20-year-old kid. Maybe 18, something like that. Maybe 17, actually. She was like the youngest of the three, right? To be honest. But talk about 17, I'm dead. She's like newly 18, maybe. I think probably like 17, whatever. Anyways, like she's not going to be a sustainable anchor for the other side. The other side will go, and then Bonnie will die again. You feel me? Which is why we get to season 6, and she's in the prison world, you know? These are the things that goes on that make it be like, okay, so you're just going to say, Kessie, you're just going to say whatever makes your side looks good, right? So can you even trust this flashback? Period. Can you trust this flashback? Can we trust that? Oh my gosh, yeah, I created. He just lied to me. Da 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 da. Or are you just vengeful? Are you just like mad that he got with another woman? That's it. You know what I mean? Maybe you guys both created the immortality spell. This is what I genuinely believe happened. You guys both created the immortality spell, right? Worked together on it. And then when he used it on himself and Amara, you made up this whole, you had to justify, well, your anger was with like the whole Silas and Amara situation. But then you went on to create this grand illusion, right? This grand illusion that, oh my gosh, she tricked me to like freaking da da da, creating this spell. But whole time you're giving yourself sole credit in this way. But if you look at Ketsia's words, I feel like it can be taken as like giving herself sole credit. But in truth, I feel like the way that she says, well, actually, let me see. I feel like the way that she says this, you feel me? The way that she says the words out of her mouth, I feel as though she never like implied that it was solely hers. I feel like everyone else implied that it was solely her that created the immortality spell. Genuinely, it's how I feel. But it's fine. It's fine. A lot of people know that whole story with the flashbacks and stuff like that. Oh my gosh, Silas and Ketsia and da da da. But they didn't hear that in season 4 finale when Silas tells Stefan, I create the immortality spell. He out his mouth with nothing to gain, period, because he's about to lock Stefan in the safe forever. You dig me? Forever. You know what I mean? Like, he does this whole situation where he says, I create the immortality spell. That's the secret. Here comes the full mystery of me. I create the immortality spell. With nothing to gain, he says that, right? She says, she gives her story. She gives her life story to Stefan. And then she convinces him that I'm about to make you a freaking daylight ring. And then 3 seconds later, she's frying his brain. You know what I mean? 3 seconds later, she's frying his brain, gang. You feel me? She's linking him to Silas. You know what I mean? All type of stuff. But yeah. Well, mentally. Linking him to Silas mentally. We're talking about what's it called? Silas, Ketsia, immortality spell. The whole situation of oh yeah, that's what I'm talking about. Okay, cool. You see how like I broke it down very, very intricately? So even though my favorite character is Silas, you feel me? And my favorite character is Stefan. And my favorite character is Ken. Right? Even though these are my favorite characters, I still went in depth as hell when I just came to like this whole Ketsia and Silas situation. Because I respect the lore. You dig me? When it comes to this whole situation of like Damon saying it was real for me, right? Stefan says she compelled our love. We didn't know what we were doing. Da 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 da. No. In fact, watch this. Stefan tells Elena that, oh my gosh, Catherine compelled both of us to like keep the secrets from one another, right? But then we go to this situation where Damon says she never compelled me. Mind you, when you turn to a vampire, you see them. Mind you, when you turn to a vampire, anyone who's compelled you, you remember those memories. You dig me? And there's a point in time where Damon is getting compelled in a flashback by Catherine after she kisses Stefan. You feel me? And then Damon comes into the room. He's all like grabby and stuff like that, trying to smooch and stuff like that. She compels him to leave her room. You dig me? There's a level that, mind you, he said she never compelled me. That's a lie. And it was in the flashback. In the flashback is telling the truth, right? The flashback is like, I mean, the flashback is telling the truth, but the person is not. In that instance, right? The flashback's telling the truth, but the person is not. So if we're gonna use that, right, as a factoid, right? There's this whole situation to where, let me see something really quickly. There's this whole situation to where you can go to the flashbacks of Silas and Ketsia and see where she creates the cure, Nice. He says, that's not possible. She says, I can assure you that it works. That it works. I'm sure. I can assure you that it works, right? She also says, he says, right, in the flashback, I want us to find a way for us to be together forever. Blah, 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 blah. So you know that it was his idea. And you know that he was equally as powerful as Ketsia. We were the two most powerful travelers amongst these people, blah, blah, blah. And yet you genuinely sit here, right? You get in the comments on TikTok or Reddit or anywhere, and you say, Cassie is the sole creator of the immortality spell. When I joke about, I rarely rage bait. When I say like Silas is the sole creator of the immortality spell, I'm only doing that because Cassia fans say that Cassia is the sole creator of the immortality spell. If I really want to dive into it, it has never been confirmed by either one. Mind you, they both say I created the spell, which cancels out everything, right? Which means that at some point, Silas helped on the spell, Cassia helped on the spell. No matter what, outside of that point, outside of that single truth, right? Everything else is pretty much a lie. And then you can go into the flashbacks and see that it was Silas' idea in the first place to create the spell. Do you dig me? So it's like he has the idea, the origins of the idea, and he said he helped on it. Cassia says she helped on it and that he tricked her, right? You dig me? It's like, okay, cool, he tricked you, but that doesn't mean he didn't help you with the immortality spell. He tricked you into being like, he tricked you because what? He gave the immortality spell to Amara? That's dandy, right? That's valid, I suppose. Woohoo! You feel that the immortality spell to Amara? He gave the immortality elixir, like one of it, like a part of it to Amara. Okay, cool. Da da da. All right, cool. But he still helped on it. You dig me? Kessie, I believe she says. I think this is her exact word. I think she says, Silas convinced Kessie to create the immortality spell for him. I think she said that. I think she said for him or something like that. If she said for him, that's giving herself sole credit, which means that I could go up to Silas and say he's giving himself sole credit for it as well, which gets back to the, mind you, they never talk about like who created the immortality spell. They never, them two right there, Silas and Ketsia, face to face, never say who created the immortality spell. None of it. And they've had like multiple conversations. They have like 2 conversations at this point. You feel me? They've had, let me see. Yeah, they had like 2 conversations. One at the Whitmore Historical Ball, another at the bar. Which is the Whitmore Historical Ball. So I suppose like one at the Whitmore Historical Ball. Actually, one at the bar, one in the room. Right, they was about to have one in the room, and then what's it called? I think Stephen pulled up. That was hilarious. And then there was another one where they just was talking at the final episode, episode 7. So these moments right here, you feel me? See how I'm going super in depth with this? I'm not just giving you bull crap. I'm not just like, yeah, Silas created it and that's that. Kessie created it and that's that. You know what I mean? I'm giving you actual episode, wham, wham, wham. You dig me? Like real intricate thoughts on this matter. You know what I mean? And so when we're talking about things that make sense, right? When we're talking about things that make sense, it makes a lot of sense, right? You feel me? Malivore consuming, right? Malivore getting consumed. Well, let's say about it. Malivore not consuming Silas, even though he's a sidekick, right? Was because he was in the tomb. You dig me? Like when we're talking about Malivore not consuming Sybil and Celine, right? They was always woo. In fact, I'm about to tell you something really quickly. In fact, there's a point where Malivore himself gets like taken down. You dig me? Malivore, let me see. I'm about to wait for a second. There's a point where Malivore himself is actually gets wait for a second. Blah, blah, blah. Blah, blah, blah. That was perfect, yo. Malibu the Vampires. There we go. Okay, cool. Apparently in the 1300s in Japan. Okay, cool. The Oni. That's nice. You feel me? He cooked an Oni. He consumed an Oni. Onis were existed in the 1300s. Onis existed, yo, in the 13. If you, I think if you ever seen like Teen Wolf, you know what an Oni is, or if you ever like, that's so tough. But anyways, in the 1400s, you feel me? 1464. Wow, it's crazy. In Nigeria, yep, that's when he goes to get Cleo. In the 1400s, should ever that being that would become known as blah blah blah. Bro said despite Cleo's claims, the, the vessel failed to hold him, who was freed once more to roam the earth. Wow. So maybe in like the 1500s, maybe after he was freed by like Cleo, like well, he was like held by Cleo, and then he was freed by Cleo. Well, he was freed. You feel me? Because they couldn't hold him, because Cleo's whatever couldn't hold him. He was freed again, and then like Ryan Clark, right, betrayed him. So that's like 1500s, maybe around there, maybe something like that. I'm about to see something really quickly. Wowzers. All right, so yeah, in the 1400s, she like he gets Cleo gets taken up by Malivore. Wham! You dig me? But then she lock him down. Wham! But then she lock him down. But then she lock him down. You dig me? Boom! Bow. He gets out eventually, right? Because Cleo's things can hold him, whatever. And then he's back to like he's about to create his own type of people. You dig me? Whatever, whatever. And then Ryan Clark is a failure, so he pushes him to the side. Ryan Clark then betrays him. Yeah. But yeah, so I think like Malivore got like reduced down to a black goo in like maybe the 1500s, maybe even 1600s, something like that. But yeah, it makes so much sense. It makes so much sense. And when I was talking about anti-intellectualism, I was talking about like the way they explained the lore, right? So the way they forget the lore, right? The way they explained Malivore's existence, or the mythos behind folklores and myths of like these other creatures, and them being erased from the world's memory, right? Makes so many sense. It makes so much sense. A golem has always been around in the supernatural world. Like you can watch The Order, you can watch this or that. You feel me? The golems has always been around. Always. I think even in Shadow Hunters they're around, right? You can watch all these shows and you would hear like the golem as much as you can hear vampires and werewolves and this and that and fairies and stuff, but when you start hearing like words like fairies and like supernatural shows, you usually start to hear like words like golem. You know what I mean? And so we're talking about like these creatures and people being surprised by like a golem being able to do this situation, or just like not liking this villain, is hilarious to me. Because okay, cool, you cannot like the villain, but don't get on here and say like the lore is absolutely garbage and doesn't make sense. The lore makes sense. You just don't like the visualization of the main villain. You know what I mean? But in truth, the lore makes sense. A golem that this is so tough to me. A golem that can consume other species. Yo, chill out, yo. But guess what? Consume other species, and in that consumption, allow you to forget they ever existed on the mortal plane. You dig me? So if they didn't leave behind a note, you feel me, saying that they were dragons, or they didn't leave behind some sketches, right? You feel me? All you have is folklore and myth. You will eventually turn into folklore and myth as that species. You know what I mean? And that right there is perfection. You feel me? Because it sets up perfect folklore and myth. It sets up that lore so perfectly. And you can use anybody from folklore and myth, right? You can use a Krampus or a leprechaun or an oracle or a sphinx or a phoenix or a this or a that or da 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 from back then. You feel me? You can use a Cupid, right? You can you can use a this or a that or a this or a that. You feel me? Back then, it's like, because it's folklore and myth. Right, even Cleo, she created so many things for Malivore. She created so many species for Malivore after he had already like consumed or gotten weakened by the consumption of other people. That was like other species, older species. That was like back in the day. She created so many freaking species for him to consume, gang. It was insane. You dig me? But it's fine though. So we have her species that she created off the rip. Well, off the mental dizzle, you dig me? And we have the OGs from over here. And so you have hope, right? This is why I also dislike when people say that hope is misused or underutilized in legacies, because she's going against Cleo's creations, gang, and she's also going against people over here. She's going against Cleo's creations, right? That Cleo created, right? Which is insane stuff, by the way. Real deal hitters, right? And then we have the older species, gang, that he consumed before he ever even got to Cleo. You dig me? So we're talking about the Onis, and we're talking about the this or that. 1300s, you feel me? 1463 and backwards, right? Because he went to go get Cleo in 1464. So 1463 and backwards. You dig me? You feel me? You feel me? The things like, okay, let me see. 1500s. I think it was like the 1500s is when he got the gargoyle. So in the 1400s, he went to get Cleo, and then what's it called? Cleo locks him up. You feel me? And then he gets out of that eventually, but Cleo's ran away by then. But he gets out of that eventually, goes back to consuming creature, tries to create his own creatures, probably, and then he eventually gets like the 1500s, right, where he consumes the gargoyle. But yeah, even then, like, he's snapping. You feel me? He's snapping. Real deal snapping. I think so. Wait, in the 1500s, if he consumes the gargoyle, I think he consumes the gargoyle in the 1500s, not the 1300s, right? The 1500s, right? Gargoyle. I think he consumes in the 1500s, right? 11th century. I knew it. Like I knew it. They was originals born in like the 10th century. He was born like the 11th century, around there, somewhere through there. Anyways, 13th century. What? 13th century gets an Oni. Karuta attacked Malivori's sword, but proved ineffective. Let me see. I'm about to look it up right quick. All right, yeah, Gargoyle. So when was this? 1500s probably. Oh, in the 14th century France, 1400s. Okay, bet. Let me see, 1400s. Yeah, so I think like either before the four, I think it was like 1413 or something like that. 1412, 1415 or something like that. I don't know. I think he got like after shortly after that. You feel me? He got like betrayed by Ryan Clark, and then boom. You know what I mean? And then boom. You feel me? He was a black goo. But the Lord makes sense, dog. And I want to like speak to people, to be honest. Like I want to discuss this with people who actually think the Lord also makes sense, because it's common sense. If you get consumed by Malivore and his whole life force, like you see how vampires, they kill people and they consume their blood to like survive. If your entire life force hinges, well, not even life force, but if you like feel yourself getting weak and sluggish and you know what I mean? And you become more sentient when you eat other creatures, right? You become more sentient, right? Then you're going to be eating a lot of creatures because you're going to be trying to chase that sentience. You know what I mean? Most likely, the natural inclination, to be honest, will be trying to chase this sentience, right? This level of humanity within yourself by consuming more and more and more and more. He even went on to like try to create his own people. You know what I mean? And then, so we're talking about like this whole idea that he was just like that the Lord doesn't make sense. It's ridiculous. Once he consumes you, and he was consuming a lot of people chasing this sentience, right? Once he consumes you, you're forgotten by the entire mortal plane unless you wrote stuff down about your existence, gang, you know what I mean? Then you're cooked. You're not remembered. You know what I mean? A permanent death, so to speak. But yeah, that's why legacies make sense. When people say it doesn't make sense, people can talk about like, oh my gosh, the magic is different, and oh my gosh, the characters look, the production quality is garbo. Da 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 da. Me personally, I just like to be in the TVDU universe. That's the TVDU universe. The TVDU, well, yeah, the TVDU. So it's like I could care less about production quality. It was fire though. You feel me? But the vampires and the Vampire Diaries was fire. The Vampire Diaries in the originals and Legacies was fire, right? So I could care less about pretty much anything else. I like the magic that was performed in, like, I didn't really care. You feel me? I like the magic that was performed in Legacy. I like the creatures that was in Legacies. I liked all of it. I like the theories and the origin stories and the lore in Legacies. And yeah. So whatever though. The lore definitely makes sense. If you believe the lore makes sense, comment down below. If you don't believe the lore makes sense, you can comment, but I don't think I'll be responding to you, to be honest. But yeah, that's the end of this video. Like the video, subscribe, turn on post notification bells. If you like TVD videos, long form yap sessions by the Vampire Diaries. The Vampire Diaries fandom is very much alive. You just have to find people who are into what you're into, right? A lot of people say that YouTube is dead, but they just haven't found their place on the platform. You feel me? Their people, so to speak, on the platform. Bye though. Peace out.